What's up, you guys? Happy first of the month. Alright, enough of that. So, welcome back to another episode of Coats and Stilettos. On today's video, we're going to talk about my top 10 things I felt were the hardest things about medical school. So, medical school honestly was nothing like I expected it to be, but everything that I needed it to be. I really enjoyed my time in medical school. I'm now in my fourth year. I have about 7 months left of medical school, and I'm honestly enjoying every single month of it. So let's go through the top 10 things I felt were the hardest things about medical school. So for this video, I'm going to build my way up so that number 10 is my least hardest thing about medical school, and number 1 is the hardest thing in my opinion about medical school. So let's get to the video. So the 10th hardest thing in my opinion about medical school was not being the top of your class. But there are a lot of people in medical school who are used to being top of their classes. So however, in medical school, everyone is just as smart as you. So it's kind of like a climb to the top. If you're so used to being at the top in medical school, you may have a rude awakening because everyone can't be at the top. So some people may find that hard to adjust to. It wasn't really a problem for me, to be honest. The next hardest thing about medical school, which is like number 9 for me, is finding time to do things that you love. Medical school is very time consuming. You will be studying a lot. There are so many responsibilities that you have to do that trying to find time to do the things that you love can be very difficult. However, it's not impossible. The next hardest thing about medical school, which is number 8, I would say, is finding time to talk to your friends and family. So when you are studying, when you are, consumed with everything that has to deal with medical school, the time that you do have free, sometimes, I know for me, I wanted to use that personal time for myself to kind of like take care of myself. And a lot of the times, taking care of myself meant like Netflix and ice cream and laying down in bed and not worrying about anything except for resting. So you will find time to do the things that you really love to do, although it can be difficult. The next hardest thing about medical school, which is number 7 for me, is finances. So no one tells you how expensive medical school will be. Granted, we all know that with medical school comes debt, and a lot of debt, and that's because the tuition of medical school is very expensive. So I knew that part about it, but in terms of the other things that you need to buy while you're in medical school, like the different resources like UWorld, all of the different textbooks that you can use, all of the different resources that you can use for microbiome, or during your 3rd year of medical school, when each of the rotations that you take, you need a new resource. There's a lot of hidden expenses in medical school that I didn't know about. Another hidden expense that I didn't know about was like how expensive step exams are. Like, I think for step 2, I spent about $2,000 for the step exam, and yeah, that was a big hit to the money I already don't have. So medical school is pretty expensive outside of the tuition, and that's something that I am still struggling with. And even though it's my 4th year of medical school and I still didn't get it, that I would say that's a very difficult subject, and hopefully I can make a video about the hidden expenses of medical school and what I try to do to combat all of those expenses. The next hardest thing about medical school is juggling all of the exams that you have. Juggling these exams can be very difficult. After time, you get used to taking these exams and you find strategies to alleviate some of the stress you may be feeling with these exams. So over time, it definitely gets easier. The next hardest thing about medical school, which is number 5, I think, is was cardio, renal, and anatomy. And I'm gonna add in microbiome, okay? Those 4 classes were the hardest classes during my 1st and 2nd year of medical school. I think cardio and renal were probably the hardest classes. And it's just because there's so much physics that goes into cardio and a little bit of renal too. And the next hardest thing about medical school for me was 3rd year of medical school. This is number 4. Yeah, 3rd year of medical school was a tough one, and it's because you have to not only dedicate time to for working, which is usually 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day. You also have to incorporate study time, and I'm used to at least studying for like 10 hours a day during the first 2 years of my medical school. During the first 2 years of medical school, now if I'm working at least 12 hours a day, where am I going to fit that 10 hours a day to study? So now we're in our top 3. The top 3 hardest things about medical school, in my opinion. So number 3 was step studying. Studying for step is something I've never experienced before. Those of you who have taken the MCAT or plan on taking the MCAT and you felt that the MCAT was very taxing and, difficult, well, step 1, it's a lot more difficult. It gets crazier. So the second hardest thing about medical school for me was the first semester of medical school. So the first semester, I think across the board for most medical students, the first semester of medical school is difficult because you have to learn to accommodate to a new surrounding, a new type of learning, and new people that you really don't know. So first semester of medical school, the second hardest thing about medical school for me. So leads us to number 1. The absolute hardest thing for me about medical school was figuring out how to study. I thought my study technique for college was pretty good. And I tried to use that exact same study technique for medical school, and I learned quickly that it wasn't going to work. So I quickly had to revamp my study skills, try to find a regimen, try to find a strategy that would help me gain the most information in the most efficient amount of time. And it took me 3 months. It took me 3 months to figure that out. So, yeah, those are my top 10 things that I felt were the hardest things about medical school. Granted, everyone has their own opinion about what was hard for them in medical school. These were mine. And I'm sticking to them. So thanks for watching. I hope that this puts a little bit of things in perspective. Medical school is definitely difficult. Everything about medical school is difficult, but you are learning the things that you want to learn. So it's difficult, but you're having fun. It's worth it. So medical school is worth it, and I've loved every single minute of it. All right, guys, see you next time. Peace.